We've now got our list of images to display successfully, but the images are really large. So in this section, we're going to start working on this V2 implementation of this app. It's going to require us to refactor a couple of different things, with the ultimate goal of showing reasonably sized images that kind of tile together really nicely. I'm going to tell you right now, the first half of this work is going to involve just a little bit of CSS, which I know is completely off topic from React. But we're going to very quickly realize that CSS is only going to take us so far, and we're going to have to learn about a new React feature in order to really build something that looks like this right here. So let's get to it. And the first thing I want to tell you about is the system that we're going to use to lay out these images, and it's going to get us only about halfway there. It's called the Grid CSS system. So with the Grid CSS system, we find some element inside of our DOM hierarchy, or our component hierarchy in our case, and we'll give it a style of display grid. Then every image or every element underneath that div is going to be laid out in a grid fashion. Now that's kind of it in a nutshell, but there's a lot of other things going on here. In order to really get an understanding of what's going on, the best thing to do is add in a little bit of CSS to implement this grid system, and then just kind of see what happens. So with that in mind, I'm going to flip on over to my editor, and inside my components directory, I'm going to make a new file called imagelist.css. So we're going to write a couple of rules inside of here to customize the images that are displayed by the image list component. At the top of image list, I'm going to add in an import statement for that CSS file. And then I'm also going to make sure that I add in a class name of image list to that div right there. I added it in between the last section and this one. My mistake. It was not there before. Let's just put it in right now and pretend like I just put it in for the first time. There we go. Okay, so now back inside of image list, I'll add in a selector for image-list. And then I'm going to put two rules inside of here, and you'll very quickly see what they do on the screen. I'm going to say display grid, and then I will also give this grid template columns with repeat auto fill, and then as a second argument, I'll say min max 250 pixels and 1 FR, and that's kind of a very long rule. So let me show you that entire line. All right, so we will definitely discuss exactly what that is doing in just a second. First, let's put one more rule inside of here. I'm going to say image list. There we go. I want to get my image, and I'm going to give this thing a width of 250 pixels. So now all of our images are going to be at most 250 pixels. All right, so let's now save this, and we'll see what happens inside the browser. All right, I'm going to do a quick search here for cars again. And now you'll notice that we have our images being laid out in a grid of sorts. Now, they're not very well fit together, certainly not how we kind of originally envisioned it over here. So like I said, we're going to have to definitely do a little bit of work on the React side of things to get these things to fit together very nicely. But first, let me tell you a little bit more about the grid system. Inside of my Chrome console, I'm going to go to the Elements tab and then click on this little arrow right here that will allow me to inspect all these elements. Then I'll hover, and you'll very quickly start to see these little dotted lines appear. So each of these dotted lines that you see up here are essentially one of these different grid slots that are going to show up. So the Grid CSS system is going to create that grid and then take each of our elements and shove those elements into a different spot within that grid. So right here, we see the space allocated for the first image. And then over here is the space allocated in this dotted line box that you see for the second image. And same thing down here, and so on. Now I want to show you a couple of different rules that we can play around with to adjust how these different images are laid out inside of here. First off, I want you to notice that each image is kind of shoved up directly against each other, which doesn't look too nice. So in order to make sure that there's a little bit of standoff between those images, we can add in an additional rule of grid-gap 10 pixels like so. So that's going to make sure that each of these different cells have a 10 pixel little spacing between them on both the sides and in between top and bottom. Let me save that CSS file, and if I flip back over, I'll see that I now get a little bit of separation in there. Now when you do that inspect, now you can really start to see those cells come together. All right, so next I want to tell you a little bit more about the grid template columns rule. Essentially what this does is it creates a set number of columns. Autofill right here means that the CSS rule or the Grid CSS system is going to automatically decide how many columns to insert on here. So in this case, it decided to put in 2. And then the second argument right here, min-max 250 pixels, 1 FR, means that each one of those different columns is going to be at minimum 250 pixels wide. And then at most, and this one's a little bit challenging to understand, 1 FR is basically a maximum allocation of space. 1 FR in this context means that for every column that we create, we want them to all be equally sized. So in this case, it's kind of challenging to communicate exactly what 1 FR does. Essentially, if we had multiple columns being created and we were manually creating each one, we could assign a different FR value to them, and then some different column or some of those columns might have a greater or smaller width assigned to them automatically. All right, now adding in that column thing definitely looked like it improved things. We got a little bit of standoff here, but remember the original idea was to make sure that we've got this like really nice kind of closely fitted set of images. So let's take a quick pause right here. When we come back to the next section, we're going to do a little bit more work on this grid system and see if we can't get these things to fit together a little bit more nicely than they currently are.